If you want to understand how a civilization begins to fray, don't look for the dramatic explosions, don't look for the stock market tickers flashing red on the evening news, or the rioting in the streets. Those are late-stage symptoms. Instead, look at the dry cleaner on the corner that suddenly stopped staying open past 5 p.m. Look at the local municipal pool that didn't open this summer. Not because of a budget cut, but because they literally couldn't find 3 teenagers willing to pass the lifeguard certification for $11 an hour. Look at the headlights of the cars passing you on the interstate tonight. Have you noticed how many of them have one eye burned out? Or the way the roads in your town aren't catastrophically ruined, but just slightly more jagged, the potholes patched with cheap cold mix that crumbles after the first rain? That is the sound of a country quietly lowering its standards. It is a phenomenon sociologists call decoy stability. On paper, the numbers are dazzling. The gross domestic product is climbing, the unemployment rate sits at historic lows, and the major stock indices are charting territory that would make a Gilded Age tycoon blush. But there is a profound, exhausting disconnect between the spreadsheets in Washington and the reality on the asphalt. You can feel it. It is that low-frequency hum of anxiety when you walk into a grocery store and realize that your usual basket of items, the same brands you've bought for a decade, now costs a sum of money that feels like a typo. It's the way self-checkout kiosks now look at you with overhead cameras, pausing the transaction to accuse you of stealing because you moved a reusable bag too quickly. You aren't treated like a valued customer anymore. You're a suspect in an automated labor-saving surveillance scheme. But this is not just about inflation. Inflation is too clean a word. It suggests a temporary weather system, a storm that will pass once the central bank twists the right dials. What we are experiencing right now is something far more structural, far more permanent, and infinitely more sinister. It is the invisible evaporation of the buffer. For 50 years, the bargain of American life was simple. If you worked 40 hours a week and played by the rules, you were granted a buffer. That buffer was the quiet confidence that an unexpected car repair wouldn't force you to choose between your dental health and your electricity bill. It was the ability to plan 5 years into the future without having to consult a spreadsheet first. Today, that buffer is gone. It has been replaced by a relentless grinding friction. Every single transaction, from buying a gallon of milk to renewing your car insurance, has become a high-stakes negotiation. You are billed for things that used to be free. You're forced to navigate endless, automated phone trees just to speak to a human being about a billing error that wasn't yours to begin with. Your time, your attention, and your peace of mind are being harvested, dollar by dollar, minute by minute. And here is the paradox that should terrify us. We are currently living through the highest nominal wage growth in a generation. People are making more money than they ever have. Yet, the average household is sliding backward. How do you explain a reality where everyone is working harder, earning more, and yet watching the horizon of their security pull further and further away? Why does a 6-figure income in a mid-sized American city now buy the lifestyle that $40,000 bought just 15 years ago? The answer lies in a quiet, systemic redesign of the American economy. One that has transformed basic survival into a subscription-based luxury asset. We've been trained to look at the big numbers. Inflation rates, interest hikes, the price of crude oil. But the real collapse is happening in the microscopic margins. It's in the junk fees that now pad every single service interaction. It's in the shrinkflation of not just products, but of public services, infrastructure, and human attention. It is a slow-motion evaporation of quality of life, and it is being driven by a highly specific, intentional set of decisions made behind closed doors decades ago. A decision that set an invisible trap. A geographic and economic chokehold that is currently closing around the throat of the American interior, locking millions of people into physical regions they cannot afford to leave, while pricing them out of the very communities they built. Most people think this is a temporary post-pandemic hangover. They think that if we just wait out the high interest rates, if we just elect the right person, or if the global supply chains finally settle, the old world will snap back into place. It won't. The rules of the game have been permanently rewritten, and the machinery of the old American dream is being sold off for parts while we sleep. If you look closely, You can see the exact seam where the fabric is tearing. And to understand how we got here, we have to look at a map, a forgotten piece of legislation from 1978, and a tiny, dry erase board in a corporate office in Arkansas that quietly redefined the physical geometry of where and how Americans are allowed to live. To trace the origins of this quiet economic confinement, we have to look at a series of highly calculated regulatory pivots that took place in the late 1970s and early 1980s. These decisions did not just alter tax codes, they fundamentally reorganized the physical and financial geography of the United States. The first major pivot occurred on December 18, 1978. On that day, the United States Supreme Court handed down a unanimous yet largely unnoticed ruling in the case of Marquette National Bank of Minneapolis versus First of Omaha Service Corporation. The court was asked to interpret a single sentence from the National Bank Act of 1864. The justices ruled that a nationally chartered bank could charge credit card interest rates based on the state where the bank was located, rather than the state where the customer lived. This ruling changed everything. Before 1978, local usury laws capped interest rates to protect consumers from predatory lending. If a bank in Illinois wanted to issue a credit card to a resident of Illinois, it had to respect the interest rate limits set by the state legislature in Springfield. After the Marquette decision, those state-level protections evaporated. The geographic consequences were immediate. In 1980, facing double-digit inflation and a stagnant economy, South Dakota Governor William Janklow saw an opportunity. He negotiated a deal with Citibank. If Citibank moved its credit card operations to Sioux Falls, South Dakota would completely eliminate its usury laws, allowing the bank to charge whatever interest rates it wanted. Citibank accepted. Within years, Delaware followed suit, passing the Financial Center Development Act of 1981 to deregulate its own banking sector. This was the moment the American consumer economy transitioned from a model based on wages and savings to a system sustained by high-yield revolving debt. The physical location of capital separated from the physical location of the worker. By exporting high-interest debt from deregulation havens like Delaware and South Dakota, national banks began systematically draining liquidity from working-class communities across the rest of the country. At the exact same time, a second geographic trap was being set. Throughout the mid-20th century, the physical distribution of American prosperity was relatively flat. A manufacturing plant in Lansing, Michigan, or a textile mill in Gastonia, North Carolina, provided wages that allowed workers to buy homes, support local businesses, and fund public schools. If an economic downturn hit one region, workers did what they had always done. They packed up and moved to another industrial center where labor was in demand. Physical mobility was the ultimate safety valve of the American working class. But during the 1980s and 1990s, the structural foundation of that mobility was dismantled. The automation of manufacturing and the offshoring of supply chains hollowed out the industrial interior. The high-paying jobs that remained did not redistribute across the country. Instead, they hyper-concentrated in a handful of coastal and Sunbelt metro areas, cities like San Jose, Seattle, Boston, and Austin. Economists call this process spatial sorting. This concentration of high-productivity industries created a massive spatial mismatch. The new high-wage economy required specialized skills and was located in highly restricted geographic hubs. However, the physical housing supply in these hub cities did not expand to accommodate the influx of workers. Strict municipal zoning laws, geographic boundaries, and the financialization of real estate turned housing in job-rich cities into a scarce luxury commodity. This is where the geographic trap clicked shut. Today, if a worker remains in a hollowed-out mid-sized city or a rural town, they face a stagnant local labor market, where the dominant employers are service sector giants, hospitals, and municipal governments. The wages in these areas are locked in place. Yet, because supply chains, energy grids, and financial services are nationalized and consolidated, these workers must pay globally inflated prices for their vehicles, their fuel, their health insurance, and their groceries. Conversely, if that same worker attempts to migrate to a high-wage metro area to improve their economic standing, they encounter an impassable financial barrier. The rent-to-income ratio in these destination cities is so heavily skewed that the wage premium of the new job is completely consumed by the cost of shelter. In 1970, the average home cost roughly 3 times the median household income. By 2026, in major economic hubs, that ratio has surpassed 8 to 10 times the median income. The safety valve of physical migration is broken. The American labor force is effectively locked in place, sorted by their ability to inherit or access real estate assets in a few hyper-expensive zip codes. Those inside the hubs are crushed by housing costs. Those outside are crushed by stagnant wages and rising national prices. It is a dual-track economic reality where geography is no longer a setting for opportunity, but a mechanism of financial extraction. This economic polarization has reached its logical conclusion in the mid-2020s, transforming daily life into an arena of administrative and financial warfare. The clash is no longer just between classes. It is a structural conflict between the physical reality of human survival and the digitized systems of corporate extraction. The primary battlefield of this conflict is the household balance sheet, specifically where necessary infrastructure intersects with private equity. Over the past 5 years, institutional investors have quietly pivoted away from volatile speculative assets and toward highly inelastic, predictable revenue streams. The targets of this capital migration are the basic services that citizens cannot opt out of: municipal water systems, residential waste management, home repair service networks, and regional property registries, according to financial industry reports. Private equity firms have acquired more than 100,000 single-family homes and hundreds of local service franchises across the American Sunbelt and Midwest since 2020. When a private equity fund acquires a local plumbing, electrical, or HVAC franchise, the operational model changes immediately. Technicians are retrained as sales representatives. They are monitored via digital dashboards and evaluated on their average ticket size, rather than their repair success rate. Simple fixes are systematically bypassed in favor of complete system replacements, which are then financed through high-interest in-house lending programs. A consumer facing a broken water heater is no longer interacting with a local mechanic. They are negotiating with a financial instrument designed to maximize immediate cash yield. This same extraction model has compromised the insurance industry, creating a feedback loop that is destabilizing municipal tax bases. In Florida, Louisiana, and California, major private insurers have systematically reduced their exposure or completely withdrawn from high-risk markets over the last 3 years. In 2024 and 2025, state-backed insurers of last resort, such as Florida's Citizens Property Insurance Corporation, saw their policy counts surge to historic highs. To offset these risks, state regulators have permitted sharp premium increases. These escalating insurance costs do not remain isolated in coastal zip codes. They are distributed nationally through the reinsurance market, where global firms price the cost of capital. Consequently, a homeowner in landlocked Ohio or Iowa, completely insulated from coastal storm surges, still faces a 20 to 30% annual increase in their property insurance premiums. Because mortgage agreements mandate active hazard insurance, these rising premiums act as an unlegislated, variable tax on homeownership that bypasses local voter approval. For those who do not own property, the modern workplace offers no refuge from this friction. The structure of white-collar and administrative employment has undergone a silent, algorithmic rationalization. Rather than executing broad-based layoffs that draw public scrutiny and depress stock prices, corporate employers are utilizing performance management software to induce attrition. Human resources departments now employ people analytics platforms to monitor keystrokes, email response times, and active screen minutes down to the second. This granular surveillance is used to establish unrealistic productivity baselines. Workers who fail to meet these machine-generated quotas are placed on structured performance improvement plans, commonly known as PIPs. These plans are rarely designed for rehabilitation. They serve as legal and administrative documentation to justify termination without severance. This process, termed quiet cutting by industry analysts, allows corporations to reduce headcount and compress labor costs while maintaining the public appearance of stable employment figures. For the growing portion of the population shut out of traditional corporate structures, The gig economy has transitioned from a flexible source of supplemental income into a primary mechanism of survival. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics indicates that multi-job holding has reached its highest level in decades. However, the algorithmic platforms that coordinate this labor, such as DoorDash, Uber, and Instacart, have systematically adjusted their pay structures. In the phases of these platforms, venture capital subsidies kept driver payouts artificially high to capture market share. Now that these companies must demonstrate consistent profitability to shareholders, those subsidies have ended. The algorithms continuously adjust base pay downward, relying on surge pricing and customer tips to make up the difference. Drivers must work longer hours and absorb the costs of vehicle maintenance, fuel, and depreciation, effectively converting the physical equity of their personal vehicles into immediate taxable cash flow. This has created a structural dead end. The individual is trapped between fixed, non-negotiable costs, such as rent, utilities, and insurance, and highly variable, algorithmically depressed wages. Every household emergency is met not with a social safety net, but with a new debt product designed to monetize that specific vulnerability. The proliferation of earned wage access apps, which allow workers to draw on their unpaid wages for a flat fee, is the ultimate diagnostic proof of this cash flow collapse. It is a modern, digitized iteration of the company store, where the worker pays a premium simply to access the capital they have already earned to survive until the following Tuesday.